did you notice that this year, or excuse me, in 2023, not every company put their Twitter bio as a little pride flag in June?
And this year, Black History Month has been very
No.
quiet.
Very quiet. That's very interesting. Fuck, I wish Scrump was here still, though, because he and Evelyn did a stream on this about like the idea of putting the woke away and whether or not they were doing it. And I don't want to misrepresent his.
Our last stream together.
Okay.
And I think I can try and present his opinion that it's not so much that that they can just put it away and then they can just change to something else and it'll be successful, but that they would like to, and that in the past they have tried to switch strategies at different times to like in 2010 roughly, for example, where the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, where the left were starting to chomp at their heels, they switched strategies to now a pro-left thing. And perhaps they would like to do that now. And I've been seeing a possibility that maybe they want to do that with the Israel conflict, but it's not working. People are already too wise to just the problem of corruption itself. And granted, it's from the left, but it's people know that it's not that. I think people have a sense that the corruption is the problem, and they not just that what the problem is, because that's what was true in 2012, but what the correct replacement is. And people are now advocating for positive things, not just to remove someone else, but to implement something better. And Assad is the only one that's supporting that. So I think they just can't do that again. They can't shift position. If they try to, it's not going to stop someone like Trump. It's not going to stop the popular right.
And it did work in 2012 because I think people were a little bit more naive, just generally speaking, because what they did was that there was this mass public from the left, this like anise, this anger, because people were feeling it in their wallets. They couldn't buy a home. All their money, they were losing the value of their money because of the Wall Street collapse, and so they wanted to go after Wall Street. And the leftists went, no. It's actually the conservatives' fault, basically, and it worked. And then and if you can look at the graphs, you can look at the Google trend graphs from of like what people were interested in. Were they interested in what was the anti-Wall Street protest called now?
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street. How that was more and more interesting, and then what just superseded it? Black Lives Matter.
Well, if you look
all of a sudden replaced it.
Yeah, if you look at, I'm sure you've seen this as well, stats on the use of the word racist and other similar words in the press just started skyrocketing in 2012, specifically all at the same time. Right. Exactly. So that was the plan. I agree with Scrump. That is something that he pointed out that I hadn't thought of, that they have made that switch. And perhaps 10 years prior, with 9/11, perhaps they made a similar switch. But the part I would disagree on respectfully is I don't think they can do it again. And actually, Scrump seemed to, I think, somewhat be open to that when I said it to him before.
I'm a little black-pilled because I think I know too much about human psychology and how, and when I say how stupid people are, I don't actually mean that they're like, okay, the idiom of the average person's IQ is 100. Now, imagine, you think of how smart the average person is, and remember that half the population is dumber than that. But outside of that idiom, which is not really an idiom, it's correct. But also, it's that people have very short memories on this kind of stuff. People also work off of group psychology. And people don't think, like I said, they have a very low cognitive load that they have to spare. So they might just. I like the optimism. I hope it's correct, but I'm not sure it will work if you just give the people another thing to be invested in and say, this is the new thing. This is our new progressive thing that we have to be worried about. Although it didn't work with the tranny stuff, to be fair, because that's what they were really pushing. Is it like, no, it's got to be this transgender rights, trans rights or human rights. That's not going over super great, I would say, in the public, because you keep telling parents that you want to sterilize their kids. Not really a winning position there.
I think
for anyone who has kids.
Yeah, if they were going to make that switch as well, they should have done it by now. And what are they doing instead? They're organizing their courts to throw weak shots at Donald Trump to try and get rid of him.
Yeah.
I don't think they can. Even the other thing is that the more they remove methods of filtering for merit among their own ranks, the more they're nepotistic, the more they care only about their own personal power, all this stuff, the less capable they are of doing this stuff. And of course, a lot of them are too old and dying off now, too stuck in their ways as well. So I think that cycle of changing target over and over again every 10 years and people following it, could it happen again? In principle, maybe. Could these guys do it again? I don't think. I think the evidence is that they can't, and that they haven't, and they aren't. And maybe the Israel thing was their attempt, but I don't know what else they have for that. At this point, the movement has got beyond their propaganda. And people have seen that the problem is the propaganda itself. The problem is the establishment, not just re the left, and then the left says re the right the next time. So yeah, I agree. But then again, a lot of the things that you said about the issues with the way normies decide what to do, it's stuff that as we talked about before. I think it's fine that normies focus on what is normal, and that the perspective that you have is somewhat favored towards the autistic way of reasoning. But that can be very wrong as well, because the autistic way of reasoning can stretch out much further than from the norm, but sometimes in the wrong direction. A lot of communism and socialism, I believe, is that kind of adventurous leaps of rationality, which were, in the end, completely wrong and very dangerous. But a normie wouldn't have come up with that. A normie would have just said, that sounds too different from what I already know. And it's true that makes them easy to manipulate. But again, it's gone too far. And I think the best evidence I can give of the fact that things are going well is that even in 2020, but especially now, how many people voted for Trump and how popular he still is. And the American public are on side with this stuff, not with all of our ideas, but with the general gist of them. And so I think this is why another reason to continue promoting positive things is that gives something to latch onto rather than just being negative against what the enemy is doing. Because then if the enemy changes, then that movement disappears. But if you say something positive, then you've got something to latch onto. And I think people will work harder for something positive than something negative. Yeah, I think...
will they? That remains to be seen. I hope that's correct. I fear it's not. Because I fear people... I for a long time did not believe that people were capable of outside of like a couple of psychopaths and like the truly deranged, that people were generally evil, or I thought people mostly kind of tend towards neutral because it's good for evolutionary development of the species. And then I read a bunch of research on how the left thinks, and I was like, oh, never mind. I don't think so. I actually think that a lot of people, particularly on the left, are genuinely what anyone not crazy would describe as evil, in terms of being like, oh, I would rather that I have less money so long as everyone else has less money. And that I would rather, quite a lot in the research, quite a lot. And when you ask them their politics, they lean left.
Yeah. I think we discussed this before, and what we found is that research was not about the entire half of society that leans left. But it's about specifically the radicals. And yeah, that could just be where that's just the psychopath dumping zone. Maybe. Because now, leftism is the way that psychopaths would get power. But it's not just them, obviously. Like the nihilistic as well is another group where almost all nihilists in society today probably will go that way. The only exception is the black pillars on the right, who I occasionally deal with. Or also, I think, too nihilistic. But yeah, there's if that's the kind of ally that you're working with on the left, it's no wonder that their power is diminishing gradually. Though their institutional power is still strong, their social power and their political capital is rapidly diminishing.
Yeah, I'd say that seems to be overwhelmingly evident. So like when I was talking to Benjamin Boyce earlier, I mentioned this. Look at all of the movies from 2023, right? All of these, with the exception of Barbie, which the reason why Barbie succeeded, even though it had a bunch of woke messaging, is because its woke message was this. This is a movie for women, and its message is, women, nothing is ever your fault ever. Of course women liked that movie. Of course that did very well. Duh. But it wasn't, there's a transgender Barbie in it, and it's very anti-male. But you're selling that to half of the population, plus their boyfriends and husbands that they dragged to go see it. That's very successful. No wonder that's successful. Women, nothing is your fault ever. Of course, that was a successful woke type film, right? Spoon and I, by the way, collectively have watched Barbie, I think 3 times.
I haven't seen it yet. I think
it's infuriating. It's infuriating. It is truly an infuriating film.
I would put it down to, that's a factor for sure, but I would put it down more so to the fact that it just looks fun and colourful and effusive, and that films don't do that much these days.
Yes.
And
that's how it advertised itself.
Yeah, and as well as that, the meme quality of Ken as well, because he's literally me. The autistic right has adopted him. Like it. So yeah, I think there's lots of things correlated together, and the co-promotion with
Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Probably didn't hurt it either, because it's like a weird contrast. that became a meme in and of itself. So yes, a lot of things went well.
It was a perfect storm.
Yes, as you say.
But every other film,
yeah,
every other film in 2023, all of their the Marvel Disney empire completely, not just the films but the television shows, just collapsed in upon themselves. I mean, abject failure after abject failure, and they had to keep saying, like, even though now we're in 2023, the lockdowns have been over, lockdowns are over. Well, just post-COVID, everyone's too afraid to go to the cinema because we told them to be afraid to go to the cinema. Isn't that cute?
I don't think it is that. I think what you're getting at is correct.
Obviously.
Like it took us a few days, a few minutes to get sick of propaganda in movies because we were looking at it with rational eyes. But your normies aren't looking at it with those eyes. They're just going to the cinema to enjoy something because their friend said it was good and it makes them feel good to watch it. And for a few years,
shove some popcorn in your mouth and just enjoy the show. Yeah.
For 5 to almost 10 years now, they've been doing that with the propaganda, and it's been effective. But they're getting bored of it now. They know these tropes, and they're bored of it, and they maybe start to sense a bit of venom from the way the movie is made. And they've heard a few people saying these movies are kind of propaganda, they kind of hate men, they're kind of anti-Western, and then they go into the movie just with that slight hint of feeling about, well, someone said that about it, but I'll give it a go. And then that feeling grows because it's true, because they can feel it's true. And just very gradually and slowly, even the normies, who are supposed to be the ballast that slowly changes, realize it's nonsense and are disliking it.
Right. Yeah, the cattle, the sheep, even they're like, wait a minute, this isn't grass. This is you are feeding me cyanide.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
It's just so recently, the Sweet Baby Games thing. If you didn't see that, they've been having do you know about the Sweet Baby Games controversy? Okay, so Sweet Baby is a consulting agency that worked on Spider-Man 2. They've worked on the Suicide Squad game that came out that was a complete catastrophe. And what they do is first of all, wow, their website is interesting to look at. They are a purely political group that, in what they do in consulting, is that game companies hire them to look at a game's script and rewrite it to be as woke, as extremely far leftist as possible.
Yeah.
And they've been found out. They got caught out for this. People found out that, like, oh, look at all of these games that have had this weird messaging, that have made all the women ugly and fat, that have put a whole bunch, put a chick in it and made her gay, made everybody black or non-white, all that. Oh, all of them have Sweet Baby Games as consultants on it. They're having a complete meltdown because on Steam, it's their games that they have worked on have been curated. So now you can see a list of every single game that they've worked on to know to avoid it.
Very good.
And they are being like, no, please remove this. Wait a minute, what? But you show all the games you've worked on happily on your website. Why don't you want people on Steam to know the games that you've worked on? That's weird. That's the kind of stuff where you can see the cracks forming in that system, that their facade is falling apart.
I agree.
My only fear, this goes back to the putting the woke away stuff, right, is that as Scrump has said, and as I think is a correct analysis, is that they can't. Even if they wanted to now, they can't, because there's too many true believers. They've created too many true believers, too many people. They created an entire ecosystem around this. But at the same time, let's say they were able to put the woke away. Where do we put it away back to? 1990? We go to let's say Dev's ideal timeline, and we just go back to 1990 and we reset the clock. Where does that end up with? Where does that end us up at in 30 years' time from that?